Okay, so now to talk about closing up, and there'll be a number of times where we close up. One would be as we're approaching built-up areas, another one would be if we're coming into junctions or roundabouts, or even a set of traffic lights. Now at those situations we'd double up, but if we're going into a town or a village, we then close up and the gaps between us wouldn't be so big. So this is what happened. As we're riding along and we can see a village or a town or even a city in the distance, what will happen is we'll start to slow it down, and then everyone would kind of bunch up together to stop any cars getting in between us if possible. So if we've got any graphic designers out there who know how to draw, then obviously these drawings aren't very good of houses, but you get the point. So as we're going in, rider number one would slow down and rider number two would just close up slightly, and that would happen all the way back down the line. So we'd end up being fairly close together as the speed is reduced, and while we're riding forward now, then you can see what's happened, and from being spaced out on the nice open roads where we've got time for that movement for our corners and other hazards, as you get into the built up areas we close right in and stay tight as a group together. Obviously going out the other end, so if we've gone through the village or the town, then as we're coming out, then we start to space out again as we get riding. Okay, just want to talk now about going in towards junctions when we're riding in a group formation. So the number one rider would be over here, with the number two rider staggered slightly behind on the right hand side. Now, if all the riders behind follow the first two riders and watch what they do, if we were turning left or right, the first rider would come up and stop in this position, and the second rider would move up and stop next to them, so they're next to each other as they come into a junction. If they're turning left, obviously by being next to each other they could both go out at the same time, so they'd make the decision number one would go out first and number two would go out with them, and then what they'd end up doing is going staggered in the new lane. So if the riders behind the first pair, see what's going on and work together in pairs, you'll see what goes on now. So rider number one and two sees what's going on, rider number one comes in directly behind rider number one in front, rider number two comes in and fills the gap there. So basically we double up all the time when we're coming into junctions. If we were to turn right, then rider number one and two would angle slightly, following the curb line around, and if turning right, rider number one still goes out first, rider number two comes out and follows, and they'd end up staggered in the new lane. So the riders behind will do exactly the same, come up in pairs and then make a right turn or left turn and then go out as pairs. What this does, it doubles up, and it means that the group is much closer together rather than stopping in a long line, one behind each other, and then making a decision one at a time to turn left or right. Okay, it'd be exactly the same if we were turning left, right, or going straight on at a roundabout. So the lead rider comes in at number one, number two sees what's going on, and then would come in next to rider number one. And that way, if there was 10 of us, then there'd be 5 pairs working their way back as we come into and stop at the roundabout. And that way rider number one makes the decision, and as rider number two sees what's going on, they can then go in to the roundabout with rider number one. If you are riding at number one position, be aware that you don't cut across and cut rider number two up. So as we go in, if we were turning left, rider number one would go in, following it around, and then as they come off they'd go into the left hand side of the lane. Rider number two would just stay on the outside and then pick up their rightful position in the new lane in the staggered position. And then likewise turning right, if rider number one comes round, they'll stay wide over to the left hand side and take up their position near the white line. Rider number two would see them going in, and then as they go round they'd stay on the near side and stay closer to the curb on the way round, and that way ended up back in the staggered position in the new lane.